The sudden confession drops into the quiet dinner conversation, heavy and unasked, like a clinical report on a private trauma. This compulsive honesty is not intimacy, but a calculated tactical strike designed to neutralize the unpredictable threat of being truly known. Beneath the flood of information lies a barren desert, where the speaker uses truth to ensure they never have to feel. In the sterile light of a modern office, a colleague shares their deepest insecurities with a flat, rehearsed cadence that leaves no room for comfort. You watch their eyes, noting how they scan your face for a reaction, yet they remain strangely detached from the heavy words they just discarded. There is no warmth in the revelation, only a cold, structural efficiency that suggests the information is being used to build a wall of data. A person at a party describes a recent heartbreak with the detached precision of an autopsy, ensuring the listener cannot find a way to connect. They offer every detail, every flaw, and every mistake, yet the sheer volume of the words acts as a barrier to any genuine emotional resonance. The timing of these outbursts is often jarring, occurring just as a moment of quiet, natural connection begins to form between two unsuspecting people. By filling the silence with a preemptive strike of total honesty, the individual maintains a safe, sterile distance from the terrifying risk of actual vulnerability. In a crowded elevator, a man mentions his clinical diagnosis to a stranger, using the label as a shield to prevent any further, deeper inquiry. The stranger nods awkwardly, feeling the weight of the information, while the man feels a surge of relief that the interaction has been successfully neutralized. We see this in the way some people describe their trauma as if reading a grocery list, stripping the experience of its raw, pulsing, human life. This radical openness functions as a sophisticated camouflage, allowing the individual to hide their true, shivering self behind a blinding glare of public facts. The physical distance between bodies remains fixed, even as the conversation delves into the most private corners of a soul that refuses to be touched. Observe the way a hand grips a coffee cup during a forced confession, the knuckles white while the voice remains airy, light, and entirely unaffected. The transparency is a floodlight, designed to obscure the shadows where the real, unmanaged, and unpredictable feelings are desperately trying to survive the bright exposure. A woman tells her date exactly why she is difficult before the first course arrives, effectively poisoning the well to avoid the pain of future rejection. She is not being brave. She is being efficient, ensuring that the potential for a slow, organic, and dangerous intimacy is killed in its infancy. The listener feels a sense of friction, a subconscious realization that they are being handled by a professional manager of their own public image. Redirection occurs through the sheer density of the narrative, as the speaker provides so much context that the listener becomes lost in the sprawling forest. In the back of a taxi, two friends share secrets that feel like transactions, each truth serving as a payment to maintain a superficial, low-risk equilibrium. The words are used to occupy the space where a shared, silent understanding should be, preventing any real, unmediated eye contact from taking place. Nothing is left to the imagination, because the imagination is where the individual fears the other person might find something truly, deeply, and irredeemably broken. By controlling the narrative of their own flaws, they ensure that no one else can discover a weakness they haven't already polished and presented. A student admits to a failure with such practiced humility that the professor finds it impossible to offer any actual, constructive, or transformative criticism. The admission is a trap, a way to occupy the moral high ground of honesty while remaining completely immune to the actual, messy consequences of growth. The masking process is seamless, as the individual convinces themselves that their lack of privacy is proof of their advanced, enlightened emotional state. In reality, they are simply broadcasting from a bunker, using the noise of their own voice to drown out the terrifying sound of their heart. The performance of vulnerability is the ultimate defense, a way to appear soft while remaining as hard and impenetrable as a polished, obsidian stone. This habit of oversharing was likely forged in an environment where silence was a dangerous void that had to be filled to ensure survival. If you're still watching, you probably notice things most people miss. You question behavior. You look beneath the surface. If that sounds like you, subscribe. This channel was made for minds like yours. The nervous system of a child is a delicate instrument, tuned to the frequency of a parent whose love requires a constant, detailed accounting. In a dimly lit hallway, a young girl rehearses her confession for a broken vase, knowing that total exposure is her only hope for mercy. She learns that hidden things are perceived as crimes, and that the only way to lower the atmospheric tension is to surrender every secret. The air in the household is thick with the demand for closeness, which in this context means the total absence of a private, internal sanctuary. A boy sits at the dinner table, his father's eyes boring into him, demanding to know every thought that crossed his mind during the long school day. He realizes that any hesitation is viewed as a betrayal, a sign of a deceptive heart that must be cracked open for inspection and correction. This is the imprinting of the forced revelation, the belief that safety is only found when there is nowhere left for the self to hide. Ambiguity became a threat in these early years, a dark corner where a parent's suspicion could grow into a terrifying, unpredictable, and violent storm. To have a secret was to be guilty, so the child learned to offer up their inner world as a sacrifice to appease the watchful gods. The trade-off was the total surrender of a private interior, trading the blooming garden of a hidden self for the sterile safety of a glass house. They learned to perform honesty as a ritual of submission, stripping themselves bare before the judgment could arrive, hoping the exposure would act as a shield. In the classroom, a child tells the teacher about a home life that is crumbling, using the facts to buy a temporary, protective sort of pity. They learn that their trauma is a currency, a way to navigate a world that only pays attention when the wounds are visible and bleeding. The authentic pulse of a private life is stifled by the requirement to be known, turning the act of living into a continuous, public testimony. We learn that boundaries are a form of hostility, a wall that must be torn down if we are to be considered good, loving, or trustworthy. The body becomes a transparent vessel, a thing that must be constantly drained of its mysteries to prevent the buildup of a perceived, toxic deception. A teenager posts their deepest sorrows online, not for connection, but because they have forgotten how to hold a feeling without immediately broadcasting it. The broadcast is a relief, a way to move the sensation out of the body and into the cloud, where it becomes data instead of pain. Every truth shared in these formative years was a way to manage the adult in the room, a tool of regulation disguised as a gesture of love. The brain optimizes for oversharing because a quiet child is a suspicious child, and suspicion is the precursor to an unbearable, crushing social isolation. We carry this blueprint into adulthood, unaware that our radical transparency is actually a desperate attempt to prevent anyone from looking too closely at us. The honest persona is a sophisticated cage built from the bricks of our own history, designed to keep us from ever feeling the weight of silence. In a therapy session, a man recounts his darkest deeds with a smile, using the clinical truth to keep the therapist from reaching his heart. He is still that boy at the dinner table, providing a full report to ensure that no one asks the one question he cannot yet answer. The world encourages this exposure, mistaking the volume of information for the depth of character, while the individual remains a stranger to their own soul. The nervous system remains in a constant state of broadcast, unable to find the quiet frequency where a self might actually begin to grow in peace. We are prisoners of an openness that was never our choice, but a requirement for a survival that we are still trying to earn today. The truth we tell is a performance of a person we think we should be, a way to manage the audience and keep the peace. We keep opening the doors and windows of our lives, wondering why we feel so cold and why the wind never seems to stop blowing. This childhood learning is now a subconscious prison, where the light is always on and there is nowhere left to simply, quietly, and privately exist. The modern relationship is often a theater of exhausting disclosure, where partners trade traumas like currency to avoid the terrifying weight of a shared silence. A man sits in a dimly lit bar, detailing his history of emotional unavailability to a woman he met only 20 short, frantic minutes ago. He believes he is being honest, but he is actually providing a disclaimer that functions as a legal waiver against any future, genuine emotional accountability. The friction begins when the recipient of this data feels the heavy burden of a secret they never asked to carry or to witness. We use the truth as a social weapon, a way to dominate the emotional space by ensuring that our narrative is the only one currently playing. In a high-pressure office, a manager confesses her imposter syndrome during a team meeting, effectively neutralizing any legitimate criticism of her current, failing performance. The employees nod in forced empathy, trapped by the honesty of a superior who has used vulnerability to consolidate her own psychological and social power. This identity-shattering truth is the hardest to swallow. You are not being vulnerable. You are simply making your private mess someone else's permanent problem. The coldness is felt by those around you, who sense that your openness is not an invitation, but a barrier to any actual, reciprocal exchange. You offer the what of your life in grueling detail, but you never offer the who, keeping the actual person tucked safely behind the data. In the bedroom, a couple practices radical honesty by listing every fleeting attraction they feel for others, mistakenly believing this transparency creates a deeper trust. In reality, they are simply wounding each other with unnecessary facts, using the truth to avoid the deeper, more complex work of actual, steady devotion. The information acts as a constant noise, a high-frequency buzz that prevents the quiet, subtle signals of real intimacy from ever being heard or felt. Modern social structures reward this dysfunction, as we mistake the loudest, most exposed person in the room for the one who is most authentic. A friend shares a harrowing story from their past, but their tone is so flat and practiced that you feel like a spectator at a play. You realize you are being used as a mirror, a way for them to validate a version of themselves without ever having to actually, truly feel. The friction is the sound of a human heart trying to find a grip on a surface that has been polished to a lethal, glass-like shine. We have forgotten that intimacy is built in the gaps, in the things that are not said, and in the quiet, protected spaces of the soul. By exposing everything to the air, we ensure that nothing can ever ferment, grow, or develop the rich, complex flavors of a truly private life. The individual who tells all is often the most lonely, because they have given away the very things that make a person unique and precious. They are a public square where everyone is allowed to walk, but no one is ever invited to stay for dinner or to sleep. Modernity treats the self as an open book test, but the most important answers are the ones that can never be written down or spoken aloud. The truth teller is actually a ghost, haunting their own life with a series of facts that describe a person who no longer actually, truly exists. We are building a world of transparent strangers, people who know everything about each other's histories, but nothing about each other's current, pulsing, and raw hearts. The honesty is a suit of armor, and the more we strip in public, the more we are actually, desperately, and fearfully hiding from the world. The digital landscape has transformed the private sanctuary of the mind into a public utility, where the most intimate shames are broadcasted for social capital. A woman stares at her reflection in the blue light of a camera, preparing a story about her mental health that feels more like a product launch. She carefully curates the lighting to look vulnerably unpolished, ensuring the aesthetic of her breakdown remains consistent with her overall brand of radical, curated openness. This technological incentive makes the behavior invisible, as the algorithm prioritizes the raw and the unfiltered, turning our genuine pain into a high-performing content stream. We have entered an era of psychological social engineering, where we are nudged to speak our truth as a way to feed the data-hungry machine of visibility. The psychological cost of this constant broadcast is a total erosion of the internal boundaries that once allowed a person to process their life in peace. When every feeling is immediately transcribed into a caption, the feeling itself becomes secondary to its performance, leaving the individual hollow and perpetually, deeply exhausted. The safety of this behavior is actually a cage of public expectation, as the digital tribe now demands a constant supply of authentic updates to maintain its gaze. In a quiet apartment, a man feels a surge of anxiety because he hasn't shared his growth journey in 3 days, fearing that silence is a social death. He has outsourced his internal regulation to the feedback loop of likes and comments, becoming a slave to the very transparency he once thought was his liberation. The tension increases as the gap between the shared experience and the felt experience grows into a canyon that no amount of posting can ever bridge. We are losing the capacity for the secret, the quiet, unrecorded moment that belongs only to us and the people we love in the physical world. A teenager records a heartfelt apology to a parent, but they are looking at the lens of the phone instead of the eyes of the human standing before them. The apology is not for the parent. It is for the audience, a way to demonstrate accountability while avoiding the actual, painful work of a private, messy repair. This safety is a cage because it prevents any experience from becoming integrated, as we are too busy narrating the life to ever actually, truly live it. The modern world rewards the exposed self, but it offers no protection for the raw nerves that are left vibrating in the wake of such a total, public flaying. We have become a society of exhibitionists who are terrified of being truly seen, using the floodlight of information to wash out the features of our actual souls. The truth has become a commodity, and like all commodities, it is being overfarmed until the soil of our internal lives is depleted and entirely, utterly barren. You are performing a biopsy of your own heart every single day, wondering why you feel so much pain when you are being so brave and open. The digital age has turned our defenses into a lifestyle, making it impossible to distinguish between a genuine reaching out and a desperate, habitual reaching for the phone. We are building a world where privacy is seen as a pathology, a sign that something toxic is being hidden rather than a sign of a healthy, protected inner life. The cage is made of updates and threads, a prison where the walls are transparent, but the locks are made of the very attention we so desperately crave. There is no comfort in this realization, only the cold wind of a life lived in a glass house, where everyone can see in, but no one can get close. The mirror offers no sanctuary for the person who has told the world everything, but has yet to tell themselves the truth about their own profound loneliness. A man stands in a quiet hallway, his phone buzzing with notifications from strangers who feel they know him, yet he cannot find the words to speak to his wife. He realizes that the transparency he championed has left him with nothing of his own, a hollowed-out vessel that has been drained for the sake of an audience. The discomfort deepens when you observe the fix-it impulse rising again, as you begin to plan a digital detox or a season of silence to optimize your new privacy. You are already turning your withdrawal into another performance, another phase to be announced, another layer of data to be fed into the machine of your self-image. The compulsion to manage the perception of your healing is the final defense, a way to ensure that even your quietest moments are still, somehow, a strategic public move. There is no resolution where the honest self and the hidden self finally merge into a peaceful, unified, and perfectly transparent whole. A woman sits in a dark room, her hands folded, trying to hold a feeling without naming it, without describing it, and without giving it to anyone else to carry. She feels the physical itch of the untold, the terrifying pressure of a secret that is not a crime, but simply a private, unmanaged, and raw piece of her own humanity. The silence feels like a threat because it is the only space where she cannot control how she is being perceived by the imaginary judges in her mind. We remove the justifications of bravery and authenticity, leaving only the stark, vibrating reality of a person who is terrified of their own internal, unpeopled depths. You do not want to be understood, you want to be categorized, because a category is a box that has a label and a predictable, manageable, and safe set of rules. The truth you have been telling is a map of a country you have never actually visited, a series of coordinates that lead everywhere except to your actual, pulsing heart. In the middle of a night that feels too long, you realize that the people you have let in are actually just spectators to a play you have been writing for years. They do not know you. They know the narrative you have provided, a sophisticated script that was designed to keep them at a precise, comfortable, and clinical distance. The unresolved insight is that the more you explain yourself, the further you drift from the actual, wordless experience of being alive in this specific, fleeting moment. Your honesty has been a form of theft, stealing the mystery and the weight of your own life and trading it for the thin, cold comfort of being known. There is no advice for this, because any how-to would simply be another script, another way to perform the act of being private for an internal audience. The radical part of transparency was never the honesty. It was the desperate, clawing need to be exonerated for the crime of having a secret, human interior. You are left with the haunting awareness that your life has become a public record, and the person you were meant to protect has been lost in the filing. The cage is not the secrets you kept, but the stories you told to ensure that no one would ever have the chance to find the secrets you didn't even know you had. The screen fades to black, leaving you in a silence that feels like a stranger's house, where the furniture is familiar, but you are not entirely sure you are welcome. You are finally alone, and for the first time in your life, you have absolutely nothing left to say to anyone, including yourself.